Hello, welcome to 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. About 5 years ago, I met a chap named Steve McWilliams. Met him down at Villanova, my alma mater. At the time, Steve was and continues to teach film production at Villanova and had a very robust career as an independent producer. Has in fact won over 30 film festival awards for various works he's done. His genre has been documentaries. His passion has been to feature, to bring to light, to tell the stories of people who have somehow overcome adversity because of a disability or because of just being downtrodden, being disadvantaged in one way or another. That has been his passion. He has told many, many stories, many of them Homeric stories of people who have somehow been able to dig down deep to overcome adversities of the worst kinds. His work is truly inspirational. I learned recently about a new project that Steve is involved in. And it too is inspirational, but more than inspirational, he's doing, as he has most of his adult life, he's doing good work for good people by bringing their stories to light. This particular story is about the incidence of suicide among law enforcement officers around the country. The film, the documentary, is called Blue. The story behind Blue, the documentary, and as it continues now to make its way across the country, is what we're bringing to you today. So with me is Steve McEwen. Steve, welcome to 30 Minutes. Again, good to have you with us. And his sidekick, his cohort in this project, Reverend Luis Centeno.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Good to be here.
for being here. This is, again, an inspirational story. I know you're going to enjoy it, and I hope, as a result of it, not only will your awareness be heightened of the problem, not only among law enforcement officers, but first responders of all kinds, and of course, as we hear repeatedly now in the news, in our military. But it's a problem that requires public attention, requires public support, and most of all, better understanding of what causes the problem and what can be done for the survivors. Enough of a prologue. Let's get into it.
Very
Steve,
good prologue.
been with you now off and on, as I said, for about 5 years. You've been on the program a few years ago on yet another project. But give me the background on this one and how you connected with the Reverend to produce the film.
Well, I'd have to say, as a filmmaker, making movies, and particularly today, because everybody's making movies, and you really, if you're going to make a movie, you really want it to say something, and like that's my passion, is to find people that are making positive social change, right. And that's always what I'm looking for. And I'm always looking for a great story. And this jumped out at me on the front page of the Inquirer, and I read a story about Reverend Lou, and I had no idea the extent of suicide amongst law enforcement officers. I didn't know it. So the article, and I really didn't think about making a film right away. I just called Reverend Lou out of the blue, and he had moved churches, so I had kind of a hard time finding him. I had to do some homework, and he wasn't tech savvy at the time, so he didn't have a website. So I ended up calling another chaplain who referred me to Reverend Lou, and I called him out of the blue, and then we met. And I was fascinated by his work, and I was fascinated by him. I thought he was a great subject for a film.
Let's learn more about Reverend Lou then, so people understand who you are, the role you play, and your particular interest in this area.
Well, first of all, as a pastor and missionary in the inner cities of Philadelphia, dealing with a lot of hurt and broken people, trying to help them with their quality of life from a social, faith, and certainly educational level. And as I was working, we had, actually it was around the time where in 2001 we received the Robert Wood Johnson Community Health Leadership Award, and back in 2001. And around 2001, I thought that as I invested so much time in the community with its people, I wanted to understand what else was going on that was being missed by the church and by the community. And this is when I began to realize that there was this absence of the quality of life initiative for police officers. Not that they haven't addressed the issue, but it has been a very difficult situation. And this is where at that time I contacted a friend of mine, Gene Hancock, who put me in contact with Robert Douglas, who is the president and executive director of the National Police Suicide Foundation. And around that time, I also had received, all this was kind of happening almost around the same time, I received a call from the police department. And what they had described to me at that point in time is that there was an officer that knew me who was down at Fairmount Park and had been discovered by a jogger that saw him with his gun, his service revolver. And I'm not sure, I can't remember because it was way back, whether he had it to his head and they saw that.
Yeah.
And they called the department and said, you have an officer down here with a service revolver to his head. And then they called me and they said to me, could you stay on the phone because we might need you to talk him down at this point in time. And they asked me some other questions, and they, make a long story short, basically, they had me on the phone and they had me waiting, and they also said any moment we may need you to have a conversation here with this. And they got a call of his wife, which there were some issues, relational issues going on. And so from that point on, I realized that, wait a minute, who's looking after these men and women in law
Well,
enforcement?
wait a minute.
Yeah.
He didn't.
He didn't.
Thank
No, he
God.
was talked
Okay.
down.
All
Thank
right.
God. He was talked down, and he didn't go that far.
right.
But then, you know, they had to follow. Now, how do we restore people of this caliber that really are excellent men and women in law enforcement? But they're people. They deal with what we never deal with
Yes.
in any given situation. Relationships is one of the highest reasons why there is that suicide component
Yes.
of what takes place at home and also what may take place in other places.
Was it at about that time you became the chaplain? for
At
the
that
police department?
time, I started to research. I first became aware by going through training at the National Police Suicide Foundation training, which they provide. And this has been excellent. It's called Train the Trainer.
And that's in
basically.
Baltimore?
And that was in Baltimore where I went. And I met with Robert Douglas and hit it off really well. And he just informed me what was going on.
Is he a former police officer?
Yes, he was a former police officer in Baltimore, and also he in Florida. He had a couple of years in Florida.
So the National Police Suicide Foundation is national, truly national?
Yes, it's national, but it's becoming international
Really?
because, Robert has been able to go overseas, have been asked to go and speak. He is one of the leading experts in our nation now.
And the principal reason for its existence is to provide scholarships to the children
Well, the
of...
existence is training, is suicide
Oh, okay.
prevention. That's the bottom line right
Right.
now. That's the training, the ongoing training, train the trainer that he's provided, you know, throughout the country. Secondary, okay, has been to provide support for surviving children of law enforcement, people that may have been male or female, and then to provide for scholarships. Being that when an officer has been killed on line duty death, which is a lower percent than the higher percent of officers who check out in this nation yearly and annually, it's incredible, it's high. It's 2 to 3 times more. Every 17 to 19 hours, a law enforcement officer checks out in this nation.
Really?
Since 2003, in our experience in Philadelphia, since I started in 2002, 2003, we had 17 suicides in Philadelphia, police officers, and that also includes retired officers. And then, but we have been able to avert 21 potential suicides.
And there's no way to pre-screen for officers who may have some
Yes.
predilection towards...
Well, there is already a test that's in part of law enforcement before they bring
Yes.
any of recruits and
yeah,
so forth.
I would think so.
There's not always the yearly.
Yes.
That probably should be something
see.
that could be encouraged, a yearly evaluation, you know, because most of the time when we receive these officers or we get these calls, or I get these calls personally, one of the things I want to do before that officer leaves me is he needs to have an evaluation.
And to what extent are you able to define the motivation into categories? Is the principal motivation family problems, marital problems, financial problems, or is it that police officers see so much of the dark side, the trash of our existence here, they just become so despondent they can't deal with it anymore?
Every officer is different, you know, so, but we at least are able to say that relationships is one of the key components. Now, that relationship could be largely home. It's very telling wherever an officer checks out, takes his life. If it's at home, you know, it's home relationships.
Yes.
If it happens in the district, is district-related situations. If it happens in the community, again, there's just different things, and there's a variety of reasons. I mean, it could be the death of a partner.
Yeah.
Could be a real
Sure.
pushover. Finances. We had, I know of 2 officers, 2010 and 2012, both had financial crises. Line duty, injuries that they feel, well, I've lost my career,
Yes.
I can't go back,
Yes.
and that becomes another stress factor. And so there's a multiple reasons for some of these.
Steve, we do want to come back to the film, but Luis, you have such an interesting story yourself. You had a life-changing experience yourself
Absolutely.
as a youngster growing up in Philadelphia.
Yes.
Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I mean, at the age of 12, 13 and a half, I had a transformation in coming to a personal relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. Prior to that, when I was 9 years old, I ended up in a reform school, St. Gabriel's Hall out here in Valley Forge, that I spent a year of my life. Yeah, it was gangs, it was drugs, it was all the craziness that you could possibly imagine. I thought that faith at that point, religion at least, could help me over that. But I found that some of the disenchantment of my experience in the inner city, and certainly the disenchantment in, say, nominal faith, because that's what I was going through, I certainly started bent toward atheism and didn't think there was a God or anything. But as a young person in 13 and a half, involved with gangs, I said to the Lord, just prayed out loud, looked up in the skies of the night skies of inner city Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, and said, if there's some kind of God out there, would you please give me some kind of answer, because I am ready to check out. So as I left that corner, didn't hear any audible voice or anything, left that corner, ran into 2 of the worst gang buddies in my gang, and at that point in time, they said, hey, you want to go to this camp? I said, what are you talking about? They said, yeah, tomorrow we can go to camp. And he said, what do you do? Oh, there's girls, there's all this kind of craziness going on. And I said, yeah, but in my mind was, maybe that could be the place I
Yes.
could take out, because there would be about 50 gang buddies, you can guarantee, and somebody was carrying. You know, at that time we made some of our own weapons. We made zip guns, which we used to take a lot of car antennas and make 22s out of
Yes.
these cars. And so I'm thinking, I'll get there, I'll spare my mother, my family, the fact of finding my body in the inner city. They would have a long way to travel. Up in the Poconos is where we went, Camp Pine Brook up there. Ministry, Teen Haven, finder and director was Bill Drury, who was back in that day reaching the gangs in the inner city. So I went up there and started thinking. He started speaking. I got so turned off, and I turned my body completely away from the center of the meeting, turning over to looking at a fireplace, and I just broke out in a sweat. I says, I want to take my life, and I want to take it now. So I'm thinking, who do I ask in the line of gang members who would have a gun that I could just check out right there? Because I just wanted to end it all right there. But as he continued to speak, it was like, you know, he kept mentioning Christ, Jesus. I said, but I learned about him ever since I was little. But I had no understanding of having an intimate, personal relationship with the Lord through Christ Jesus. So I said 3 things that day. I said, God, either you take my life, Christ, or the gangs are going to take my life, or I'm going to take my life. So if you could do this, I'm willing to give you a chance. I don't know what that means. I don't know how that's going to happen. My life was so full of despair and hopelessness that I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, other than I wanted the pain to stop. And that's what sort of hits all of us when suicide takes place. People do not necessarily want to check out. They want the pain to stop. And that's what I wanted, to stop the pain.
And obviously it worked.
Amen. Yes, it did.
Because you've dedicated your life now to helping others.
Exactly.
And raising a brood of 10 children.
Yes, 7 biological and 3 adopted. We've been married 44 years. My wife was 17.
Goodness.
I mean, she was 16.
Yeah.
I was 17. Yes.
Reverend, you're a glutton for punishment. In the Lord's name. In the Lord's name. Okay.
He's the one that helps us
Okay.
persevere.
So that's the context.
Yeah.
This is a man dedicated to serving others. You have been dedicated to serving others in your own way. You read a newspaper article in the Philadelphia Inquirer about the fine work that Luis was doing in Philadelphia. The storyteller in you said, hey, there's something in this, and you tracked him down, and then what happened?
Well, I have a partner, Matt Morensic. I got a shout out. Matt and I.
What's his name again?
Matt Morensic.
Okay.
He was a student at Villanova at one time, but he and I have partnered on several projects now. And he's really a bright guy, and so he and I I throw him a vision. I make sure, Matt, do you think this is a good idea? And if he says yes, then I usually, because I'm very impulsive. When I see a good story, I'm out off to the races. But Matt's a little more staid. And so we talked it over. Then we both met. Both went and met Lou, and then just the very story you're hearing, we're hearing this whole story. And I was just fascinated by it. I have relatives in law enforcement, so I didn't know there was a problem. And certainly, you know, I always look at who's going to be the audience for the film. And I realized and then I started reading about suicide, and it was a national problem with, as you said, first responders and military folk. So I said, well, this is a timely thing. And then I found out that the International Police Chiefs Association, which is in Alexandria, Virginia, had been conducting a 5-year study on it. So while we were filming and as we were winding down, well, actually, Charles Ramsey, the police commissioner, who was very cooperative and really supportive of the whole project, and that was a great experience dealing with him and Deputy Commissioner Ross. To allow us to do it, to get that access, was really tough. And so we had to go through a couple of hurdles to do it. But once we did, it was just great.
But what was the storyline? What is the storyline?
The storyline is well, we have a couple stories in the film of guys who have been talked out of it. And there's a story of a family where...
Are these actors or are these...
No, these are real
people.
cops. And we have a girl in the film, Christine DePietro, whose brother committed suicide several years ago. And then so we will look at how that suicide affected the family and got the message across that two people that are committing suicide, and I think the big message is people, like Lewis said, is they're in pain, they want it to stop, but they're really not stopping the pain. They're passing the pain on to the people behind. So there were so many interesting people we met in this thing. There was a retired officer who had, in the film, who I met at a suicide workshop, who we interviewed, had tried to kill himself, or he had contemplated.
Fantasized it was going toward.
And then we have two guys that are kind of smoked out. We blurred out. Who recently, the two guys that Lou kind of talked to and counseled out of suicide. So the through line of it, and then we basically, the first act of the film, the first 10 minutes of the film, we basically take the audience through the daily challenges of being a police officer in Philadelphia, particularly in North Philadelphia.
Yes.
So we drive around with a couple policemen. So they give you kind of a context of the stress of the job. And then the second act, we go into these individual stories. And then the third act, we sort of talk about, you know, the help that's available and the work that Lou does. So it's broken into kind of 3 phases, 3 acts. And
how long is the film?
About 33 minutes, 34 minutes.
Yeah, I thought it was a short film.
No, we have a trailer, 5 minutes, 11 seconds.
Yeah.
Let's watch a part of that trailer. Let's watch a minute or so of that trailer just to give us a sense of the drama, I guess, in the film. And we'll be right back.
I thought that the right answer was my weapon that I had right beside me. And I took my gun and I put it in my mouth. And I just called my ex-wife and asked, how can she ever forgive me for what I was planning to do? And I had no answers.
Good evening, sir. I'm going to be solo using 25 Charlie car. You make me available.
Unit 11, all your canary.
23, show me a route.
What do you do when you're in a difficult place, in a dark place?
Same 5, use 25 car.
Who do we really call on, and how do we get through that dark place unless we're able to process things? I have no refuge, no one who cares for my life. You ever feel that way?
Lane and Dawkins.
Sometimes it's hard to know who can I trust, who can I look to.
2521. Ryan and Soto are 23.
Can I look to somebody on my right? Can I look at somebody on my left? Who do I really go to when I have this whole area in my life that's this void?
All right, Eddie's attention over. 13th and Butler. We had a shooting the other day.
Listen to my cry, for I am in desperate need.
The plaintiff was sitting in his vehicle. Unknown male approached.
Rescue me from those who pursue me. So as you move through life, you may find yourself in a cave.
That's the second shooting at that intersection in less than 3-4 weeks. So let's make sure we put that on our logs.
You may wonder whether anybody is really listening to your complaint as you try to process some of those difficult moments.
What I want are fewer people committing suicide, and officers and their family members, for that matter, that aren't afraid to seek help if they need it. If nothing else happens, that to me is success. It's an issue that we've got to be able to deal with proactively, and dealing with it after the fact is not how you deal with it. You've got to prevent it from occurring in the first place.
Who's really looking after them? Who takes care of the men and women in law enforcement who are trying to provide the quality of life for its citizens and keeping it safe and trying to do everything they can, putting their life on the line?
I got in a full pursuit once with a male for a narcotics violation. Guy we pulled over. Guy had been up doing drugs for a couple days. Chased him into an alleyway, lost my partner at the time. Guy turned around, guy wanted to fight, and fight was on. And, you know, it lasted a couple minutes, and unfortunately for me, he wound up getting hold of my gun. And he was trying to shoot me with my own gun in a dirty, stinky alleyway with no backup. I couldn't get to my radio. Guy was covered in blood. I was bleeding, he was bleeding, and basically almost fought this guy to the death in an alleyway. Fortunately enough, my backup was able to find me, and we were able to get my gun off this guy without something really bad happening. That's probably the most dangerous day I've had on this job.
Police officers that needed help did not seek help because of the stigma. Fast forward to today, there's still a stigma, but I think it's a little better than it was before. Give you one example. When I first came here, first year here, we had a very, very bad period of time we went through with a lot of officers being killed in the line of duty. In fact, during my time, we had 5 in a 9-month period. That's when we formed our partnership with Penn Behavioral Health. And I made not only the officers that were in that unit go, I went myself, I made my whole command staff go to lift the stigma. Plus, I needed it. I mean, that's a tough period to go through for anybody. And I thought it just sent the right message when I went myself and I had the entire command staff go. And we had a lot of officers that did reach out and seek services as a result of that. So it's better, but it's not where it needs to be.
Those were my thoughts. Were they the right answers? No. Was it something that I really wanted to do? That wasn't me. I just needed guidance.
That was telling. If that little snippet is an indication of the intensity and the drama of the film, then viewers are in for something special.
That trailer, because that trailer really is powerful, so short, but...
Well, we showed the film. I mean, I think the real marker was we showed it to the police commissioner, which I was very nervous about when he first... So we went to his office and we showed it to Charles Ramsey, who, if you've ever been around him, he's a very intimidating guy. He's very
he doesn't look like a big man.
Well,
He's not a big
he's
man.
got a presence.
Yeah,
and you just know you're around somebody who's really he's got greatness eluding. So we wanted to really please him because he had given us this access. So we showed it to him, and I mean you can describe that experience. I think he liked it. And he thought
he came across very good. He comes across very good.
And he's a big part of the film.
He's
sort of like the narrator of the film.
Okay.
Yeah. So we interviewed him, and he participated, and so did Deputy Commissioner Ross, and both were terrific. And they really, I mean, they gave 100% support. And then we showed it to the policemen in the district.
Yes.
Well, we shot it in the 25th district, which would be Kensington, which is it's a rough place to be a cop, and big drug trade up there. So we showed it about a month ago up there, and it was really well received. I mean, so I'll let you take over about the film and how you felt it went
What's
out.
the message of the film? Is part of the message, here are the things that should be done to prevent this consequence?
I think what the film does, the film brings a couple lights to different things. First of all, it shows you the concern It brings out the concern,
Yes.
suicide. You'll find that in the trailer at the beginning. You know, it shows you what we're concerned, what the commissioner's concerned about, what we're concerned about. And then it shows you real cops doing real work in very difficult and dangerous area that any day they may not be able to come home because they either get killed on the job. It shows you that aspect of it. But also then it speaks to the issue of the community understanding. These men put their lives on the line, but also there is a fallout. And we need to understand and be educated about that fallout. We need to appreciate the men and women in blue, and we need to understand that they also need a quality of life, as they are providing a quality of life for all of us, trying to keep us safe in our families. They need to do it. But then it goes into that dark area where, yes, they are, you know, they have fallen into this dark place. And in this dark place, not everybody comes out. It's darker than even the work they're doing, because it gets to a point of despair and hopelessness that they can't stop whatever pain is, whatever dynamic they found themselves in, and they want to check out. And then it shows you the part of where officers actually got to that point. The one who's very visible, a retired officer who shows and says how he got to that dark place. The others whose mouths are muffled and says, yeah, we were there, we had the gun in and Ohio. Have you.
And this is not an urban problem alone,
This
is
is
it?
no. This is not just an urban problem.
It's suburban
We had
communities?
what? We had one of the chief police. You had one of your chief police back in I don't know, Wayne, or I know it was out here in Radnor somewhere, who checked out a couple of years ago. I mean, this I'm talking about a couple of years, maybe about 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Yeah, been to 15 years ago. Actually, I met his daughter. That attended the church at the church, Wayne Church of the Savior, and it was her father. You know, so it was a very difficult thing.
So it is ubiquitous, it's national, it has nothing to do with urban, although I guess the incidence...
Urban is probably the strongest,
sure. But you said men, then you said men and women. Is the problem as prevalent among female officers as...
It's becoming more so. It was
it?
largely men, okay? You can say who probably already on the job, some maybe 14 years, okay?
Wow. Yeah.
You know, largely white,
Yes.
Anglo, who basically were struggling with certain things at home and so forth. Yeah.
You know, a weird question just occurred to me. If a policeman does take his or her life, there's insurance. Does life insurance cover suicide?
Well, what insurance is going to take you if they know that you are planning or may plan because of the high combatant and stress area that you're going to plan to do this? They don't put you up for insurance. No, there is no insurance, okay, that will cover this as suicide as a
But if
policy.
I have life insurance as a police officer and a suicide occurs, there's still a benefit to my survivors, I assume.
I have not looked into that. Actually, if it were, and then I don't think the cry would be as loud for us to kind of promote the issue.
I'm not sure of that.
Yeah.
I think in otherwise, that if you have a normal, regular insurance policy, if it is as a result of suicide, I don't think there's a payout. I don't think.
Yeah.
My memory's a little dim on that. I'm certainly not an expert in it. Okay, so, Steve, you underwrote this project because of your belief in it, your commitment to it, as you have many others as well.
Well, you know, I thought there was an audience for this, and if it's a good idea, I mean, you're making a movie, you're trying to figure out what you're going to do with it after you make it, because you don't want to just put it out there with a thousand. Everybody's making a movie, so you're trying to find a purpose for it. You're trying to find a definite target audience, which is had, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to find a sponsor. So a lot of people do business with the police officers.
Sure.
So the big thing is getting distribution. So if we get it distributed through the International Police Chiefs Association, and the plan is to partner this film with this report that they've done. People probably will read the report after they see the movie.
Yes.
Be a more likelihood that they would. So we're hoping that there's going to be a sponsor. Certainly, you know, car companies do business, Motorola,
Yes.
electronic companies. A lot of people do business with cops. So it's a targeted demographic. So if we do distribute this thing internationally, you have a population of millions who are going to not only buy products through the police departments, but as consumers themselves. So it delivers from a commercial point of view. The film delivers a demographic to an advertiser, and so we kind of figured that early on, and that's how that's what I've done before. I've partnered with a lot of nonprofit organizations, and what we'll do is we'll get a sponsor for the film and put a sponsorship at the beginning of the film.
But would this be a candidate for PBS?
I think it might, frontline.
If there were a sponsor for it?
Possibly get underwriter, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's 30 minutes or more than?
About 35, I think
35
it's
minutes?
35, yeah. Closer to 38 maybe
And
with all the credits.
Have you put it up for the film festival? yet?
No,
Or will you?
we're talking, we took it down to Alexandria, to the International Police Chief, International Association of Police Chiefs, which is, it's kind of, and Ramsey's a member of that, so he basically told them about the film, they called me, I went down, screened it for them, I'm going to go back again and screen it again. So right now, we're kind of in a decision-making mode, what we're going to do, we're not sure.
But if it's not on television, it's not going to be in a theater. If it's not on television, the public isn't going to have access to it, correct?
Well, I think the first audience is key.
Or the internet.
Yeah, but the first audience we were really going after were law enforcement
Yes,
officers.
understand.
So, and that's a pretty substantial audience. You know, so if you're looking at, and the idea would be to give it away, to give it away to all the precincts, use it in training, use it at police academies. So that's it. So I would see it more being a training film. It's a documentary, but you use the documentary in training. So, and like even we talked about cutting it even smaller in different segments and using it as for roll call.
Yes.
And just real quick hits, and just encouraging, because the culture of policing, there is sort of a culture of silence, macho kind of like,
Yes, sure.
you take it all, you don't
Yeah.
share. So the idea, hopefully the film would help people kind of discuss with each other and maybe seek help if they're having these kind of feelings early on.
Yes.
So we see it as kind of as a call to people, or to say it's okay to discuss
Yes.
these dark topics that nobody really wants to discuss. So that's what I'm kind of hoping it's going to be used for. And I said, Lou's out there in the line of fire all the time. He talks to these guys. He's intimate, and I think we're kind of letting Lou and probably Robert Douglas at the National Suicide thing figure out what's the best way to use the film, because when they started, I was kind of following his lead. Everything I learned about this whole issue, I've learned from him.
I understand.
So that's where we are
Luis,
now.
you must be on call now.
Yes.
Around the country.
Well, I don't know about the country, but at least
Well, you will be. I'm
yeah,
sure.
in Philadelphia here, we get a lot of calls.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been good, and I mean you have a little bit over, depending what statistics you get, about 18,000 agencies, in this country, and you have a force of probably 620,000
Wow.
law enforcement officers of different agencies across the country.
It's amazing.
And so our desire is to see these men and women prepared. But I'm also concerned about the community.
You're doing great work, and I applaud you for it. Thank you very much for sharing your story. Steve,
Rick.
always good to
Thank
see you.
Thank you.
Reverend,
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it. Thank you
God
for
bless, and thank you for all
Appreciate
you do. Until next time, this is 30 Minutes. I am Rick Anthony. Take very good care of yourselves. The next time you see a police officer, say thank you.